from the tower of please excuse any lack of intellectual, academic grasp. This is more of a heartfelt topic. It's actually quite appropriate today for Mother's Day. Because if we misunderstand and therefore misrepresent our Father, we will be vulnerable to misusing, potentially abusing, or destroying our Mother. Speaking largely of the relationship between Dharma and Earth, the bull and the cow, in the beautiful chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam had been spoken shortly before the narration given by Varsana Swami. After Sri Krishna departed this world, and truth and dharma and good qualities followed, and the Lord had entrusted into the hands of Arjuna the protection of the queens of Dwarka, who were subsequently kidnapped by what Srila Prabhupada referred to as a group of insolent cowherd men. And the remaining queens were entrusted to the protection of Vajra, who had been coronated the king of Mathura by Maharaj Parikshit, who had become emperor of the world when Maharaj Yudhisthira went north. Vajra took Krishna's queens to the bank of Krishna Sarovar. And Maharaj Parikshit was also with the group. They began a sweet kirtan with the intent of invoking the presence of Uddhava, who, although in human form was already in Badrikashram, illuminating the stages there in the glories of Brajabhakti, as inspired and instructed by Krishna to do. They knew he was also residing on the bank of Kushum Sarovar, which is this lake just outside the building here, in the form of a creeper. So as their kirtan became very heartfelt, Uddhava emerged from the foliage surrounding Kushum Sarovar, and hearing their plea that he recite Srimad Bhagavatam, which was their means of regaining the association of the Lord, who had just left this planet bereft of his personal association. A very interesting thing happened. Maharaj Parikshit was there with Vajra and the queens of Dwarka, eager to hear from Uddhava. And Uddhava told Maharaj Parikshit, you have to go patrol the kingdom, lest Kali establish a foothold. We will hear Srimad Bhagavatam later from Shukadeva Swami. Maharaj Parikshit was very troubled by this, in a sense. He was very in great anticipation to hear from Uddhava, Srimad Bhagavatam. So taking that instruction to heart and controlling the kingdom is when he found imitating a Kshatriya was not actually a Shudra, it was actually Kali. Assaulting the bull and the cow, specifically trying to break their legs. Because this is Kali. establishing a foothold in his age, which he cannot do as long as Dharma is standing on his four legs. So, misunderstanding our Father, misrepresenting Father figures, we are vulnerable to mistreat, abuse, and to some degree destroy another, referring here largely to the earth, who is not only our collective body and our collective life system, life support system, also our collective psyche, a field holding on various levels the collective subconscious, from which the archetypes, the unfolding patterns of the universe through the language of symbology, direct us on the path leading out of hell and back to home. And when the Father figure, not the genuine Father, but the imitation, the counterfeit, whatever you want to call him, forfeits his role as protector, provider, emblem of integrity and encouragement, and he becomes exploited. Who suffers most? The children. And that is passed on from generation to generation. As the Lord of the Old Testament says, I visit with iniquity 7 generations of those of verse 2. He's not talking about the wrathful nature of the Old Testament God. He's talking about the nature of conditioning. However we may not like the deficiencies of our parents, those are the qualities we imbibe and hand on to our own children until someone comes along to uplift the system. Father figure we're referring to here today, amongst the 7, is the bull, who may also be an ox if he chooses to renounce his procreative fecundity. Or in New Vrindavan we have an interesting blend of the two, called bullocks, which is mostly what we have in the ox barn now, which means that the cowherd boys who perform the operation to make the bull into a, well, they became half brahmachari in the process. Somewhere in between, that's what bullocks. So we're talking about 3 biological, well, the same biological species, but 3 forms. Bull, the emblem of male fecundity. Ox, who may not be willingly, but renounces that power which the bull embodies, to become gentle and serve in the agricultural field and cultivate spiritual bounty is even more of a sacrament to cowherd folks. Well, not more, but generally a farmer or even a community in some cases would have 1 bull or maybe 2. All the rest of the boy cows become oxen. In the days predating tractors, it was a little bit more desirable to have a male calf than a female because of the need for power. Today, when you say somebody's out of power, it means, their electrical grid is disconnected, which is actually desirable. But they think, how can we live without power? They're talking about electricity, which somehow wasn't necessary until the past recent phase of terminal illness of the ecosystem. Prior to that, power was the bull or the ox. So, when that father figure, Dharma, the bull, the substitute, or his representatives, the human father, the guru, the Brahman, anybody becomes, deviates from the wholesome, holy path that becomes substitute. That father figure can be exploitive, manipulative, combative, competitive. And that's not what we're talking about as a male figure. We're talking about the wholesome male, the contrast of which we've all probably experienced is the counterfeit male. We talk about male energy as being macho, combative, competitive. That's not male energy. That's the counterfeit, which fills in the void when the genuine male is absent. What happens to the ecology? When we talk about ecology, it's not that we're ecologists, right? It's the common understanding of what Varnashram represents. A healthy ecology, life support system of the planet. Not only do our regulative principles, which are represented by the four heads of the bull, austerity, truthfulness, renunciation, or conversely, the absence of those four legs is intoxication, eating, gambling, illicit sex. And you'll find that working with cows or oxen, it helps to soften the heart if we have a proper relationship to it. In the absence of ox power or any organic, sustainable power source, what happens? It is to fuel a plundering, multinational, corporative, structure for the purpose of overproduction, for the sake of overconsumption, under the influence of the socially transmitted disease called affluenza, which we mistake our legitimate needs for our illegitimate wants. And therefore you have a third world country because you have a first world country who thinks that somehow they're, what do they call them? When you go to waste warning countries, and they've got our vital interests. As if our vital interests somehow ended up in somebody else's country. And because they're restraining us from our overconsumption, that's somehow a legitimate reason to wage war. And it's just mean. Affluenza is not just a convenient term, it's a very toxic mental state with all kinds of hideous symptoms, like scapegoating and blaming and irresponsibility and mistreating others, and on the list goes. Problem is, in a world which is already under the influence, you can tell someone that we're living in a toxic world. We're eating food grown from toxic soil, breathing air which is toxic from industrial waste, drinking water which is toxic from fracking water dumped in, and on and on. Although we take a vow, no intoxication. We're living in a toxic world. Or, in a toxic world, an individual who succumbs to addictions can go to, rehab, or someone who has some mental disturbance can go for counseling. But we're living in a system where the collective conditioning and intoxication is reinforcing all the individual addictions. So you treat the individual and place them back in the culture that created the ailment. How effective? Now, formerly, traditional societies had their educators, their religious leaders, their social critics, their shamans and brahmins who would guide society in relation to itself, its surrounding world, neighboring countries and societies, the universe, and the ultimate mystery behind it all. The fact that the earth is in such a condition as she is today, where does an entire planet go for counseling? We have Srila Prabhupada's books. Now, it's not only that our vow to avoid intoxicants is compromised by living in a toxic world. Intoxication is always accompanied by denial. There's a secondary denial that, no, I'm not addicted. There's the primary denial, which is not a symptom of addiction, it's the cause of it. That is the denial of who we really are, how we're called to live. Denying that truth is painful. And to numb the pain and feel the emptiness, we become vulnerable to intoxication, which develops a secondary denial. No, I'm not addicted. But when humans are conceived, carried, born, raised, and conditioned in an overall culture of denial, and you approach them with the notion that they're in denial, what choice do they have but to deny it? So Maharaj Pariksit, when he found Kali trying to break, already Dharma's 3 legs were practically crippled and Kali was striking at the last, which is truthfulness, the last leg of religion, and Maharaj Pariksit intervened. He said, you can't live in my kingdom, he's going to kill him. Kali surrendered. He said, wow. You can live where there is illicit sex, reading, intoxication, gambling. Kali said, don't exist in your kingdom, give me something practical. So where there's a hoarding of gold, because then all the others will naturally follow. Maharaj Pariksit had gold. He used it to fund the Sankirtan movement. And there's hoarding for selfish purposes. These other symptoms arise. So what is a relationship? To just talk about ox power in a class might not be very inspiring if you don't connect it with the ox is Dharma. His 4 legs are essential. Not that he's protected from slaughter alone, but for his 4 legs to stand firm, he has to be properly engaged. Srila Prabhupada's definition of cow protection is not that they don't go to slaughter, it's that they're jolly. Well, anybody who's worked with oxen, well, any cow, the girl cows are happy when they're milked, and they know that their milk is appreciated by human society. Everybody needs to feel appreciation to be satisfied. Cows, they have the same need as universal. What is the need of the ox? To be retired the day he's born and found out it was a boy? No, there's no satisfaction in that. He is satisfied when he's the father figure for society, providing, producing. And Srila Prabhupada's definition of Dharma is that which sustains. Sustaining a healthy family. In which case there will be prosperity, as Queen Kunti uses the term, referring to Krishna's glance and presence in which everything is prosperous. What kind of prosperity are we talking about? Krishna consciousness. And all the natural gifts the Mother Earth, the four-legged cow is the microcosm. The universe is the macrocosm. And that's why you have oceans of milk and salt water and liquids, the different portions of the cow that you're in on that planet. Four-legged cow, microcosm, universe, macrocosm, and the earth is in between. All containing all the demigods, working in harmony, meaning cosmic law and order, Dharma. And how is it all set into motion? The Vedic bull, Grisha, sets the whole universe like a wheel turned by a turnstile in motion. Grisha, the hero of Buddhist culture, is a bull. That motion is sustained by Dharma, who is the ox. And he lifts one of his legs at the end of every yuga until when he raises the fourth, last hoof from the earth, is the apocalypse, the either partial or complete dissolution of the universe. So, when the ecosystem becomes toxic due to overproduction for the sake of overconsumption of the item of addiction we call consumer goods, fueled mainly petroleum, which is toxic. The ecosystem becomes toxic. Our vow to avoid intoxication is compromised, it's unavoidable. What is the effect of the consciousness? Polluting the environment, burying our lies, also buries our truths in the dumps, proliferating the surface of the earth, seeping down into the water. That is the collective subconscious. And when that becomes toxic, the language of the archetypal world, which is symbols, which don't require conscious interpretation, because your subconscious knows what to do if the message is clear. But it's obscured and blurred by deviation from the natural order. So, seeing the symptoms of Kali Yuga, which actually began very subtly, even while Krishna was still present in Dwarka, but was contemplating his departure, and some very discerning souls, like Uddhava, and also Ganga Devi, like Uddhava, approached Krishna and asked, "Sita, you're going to leave," and his only request is, "Don't leave me behind, take me with you." He said, "Well, you're one of the few who will stay behind, because you've seen the glory of Braj Bhakti. You have to reveal that to the world, beginning with the sages of Bhattacharya, from there to everywhere." And Ganga Devi, she approached Krishna. Ganga Devi, who is to Gaur Mandala inseparable. Holding Navadvipan in her loving embrace, Ganga Devi, she was in a transcendental sense a little jealous of her sister Jamuna, in whose waters Krishna delighted to play as a child. All types of childhood games. Ganga Devi and Navadvipan performed severe tapasya to attain the same fortune as her sister. And she did. Lord Gauranga played very similar games to that of Krishna, more of a little intellectual nature, rather than the monster demons coming as beasts every day. They were intellectual ones, the pundits, not the devotional blessing, secular. So Ganga Devi, she could discern, and she approached Krishna. My Lord, you have been so merciful to me, but I see symptoms of Kali are just very subtly appearing, from which I can understand you will be departing. When you depart, Kali is rampant. I beg your blessings to go underground, as Saraswati has already done. And Krishna told her, one of the most prominent of the three answers Krishna gives anyone, not yes, not no, usually wait, be patient. But he was specific. 5,000 years from today, which is not the time of Lord Gauranga, it's the time of Srila Prabhupada. In 5,000 years, my mantra Upasika will descend into this world, and he will establish Eko Varna, which sounds strange. I thought Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish Varnashram. But first is Eko Varna, one occupation, Krishna Bhakti. One mantra, Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
In this Eko Varna, established by this mantra Upasika, there will be one occupation, one scripture, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. One occupation, service to Krishna, one scripture, and one mantra, which he will take to all the world. So Srila Prabhupada here in New Vrindavan, the very last darshan he gave to the plow department, which is, well, now it's just me, but then it was two of us. Darshans at that time was by your department, so last department, last darshan for the plow department. Now Srila Prabhupada was not feeling well that night. The weather had turned damp and cold, and he was feeling very ill. So the devotees congregated for darshan. Srila Prabhupada was not coming out of his room. Devotees, Pradyumna told him, we won't be giving darshan. The devotees were filing down the flag. When he saw that they were leaving, he called them back. He wasn't speaking. He asked Pradyumna, read. And he read from 12th canto, Symptoms of the Kali Yuga. None of these cantos, later cantos were translated, so Pradyumna was translating as he went. Srila Prabhupada was clearly not feeling well. But then when he started hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, as always, he became animated. And the Pradyumna read in the Kali Yuga, the standard for beauty for men was long hair, and Srila Prabhupada, just see, Vyasadeva had not yet seen hippies. It's Chigal again. And then, but the really significant one was regarding this particular train of thought. In the Kali Yuga, people will think that going on pilgrimage to a distant place to take bath in a holy river constitutes your Dharma. And he commented that in the age of Kali, people forfeit all Vedic practices except this one. And he said, I lived in Calcutta. Ganges flows through Calcutta. People who live on the bank of the Ganges go to Hardwar to take in the bath of the Ganges. They don't hear from the sadhus, which is the real purpose of pilgrimage. And then they think they fulfill their Vedic obligations. And then he extended it. You're living in New Vrindavan. You got Shri Vrindavan Chandra. Why do you have to go to pilgrimage to you? Confirming what he has said so many times in New Vrindavan is not different from Boma Vrindavan and Loka Vrindavan. But anyway, he really made an issue of that point. People think, and they adhere to that one principle, going to distant places to take bath in holy rivers. So Ganga Devi was telling Krishna, I know that in the Kali Yuga they'll adhere to this principle. They'll abandon every other principle and adhere to that one, which means all these sinful living entities will come to me and can I just go underground like Saraswati has already done and come up and Satyuga resumes? And Krishna said, no. The Maya Mantra Upasika goes to the west and brings devotees from the Western world to India. They will take bath in your waters and purify you from the sinful reactions that you have accumulated from these other people. And then, Lord Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, he alludes to there, it is said there will be a golden age. This is where it comes from. Krishna told Ganga Devi that from the appearance of my mantra upasika in this world will dawn a golden age within the Kali Yuga, which is actually an understatement. Because it's based on the Maha Mantra, which is Golokita Premanana Harinam Sankirtan. And this Ego Varna of Haribhakta, Haribhaktas, it's superior to the Satya Yuga. So what do you call it? Shuddha Satya Yuga, Prem Yuga, take your choice. Lord Krishna said that will begin 5,000 years from now, which is the appearance of Srila Prabhupada and lasts for 10,000 years. After that, when the golden age, when the sun sets, so to speak, then Kali Yuga will resume full force. Simultaneous to that, Govardhan will complete his disappearance act. And Lord Krishna told Gangadevi, at that time you better go underground, as will whatever remaining devotees are still on the planet. We are seeing the dawning rays of that Prem Yuga, the golden age, the long prophesied golden age within the Kali Yuga. But don't think that is without its challenges. Kali does not just passively leave the world to facilitate Lord Rama's mission. He facilitates in another way, by challenge. He makes it difficult. And especially in the dawning days, that golden age, Kali is like a wolf lurking in the shadows, in the absence of the lion, seeking whatever portion of the flock he can take for himself, the flock being us, the lion being Lord Gauranga, who is also present in the Sankirtan movement, and the wolf being Kali. With the return of the lion, the wolf vacates. But until the lion has established his position, there will be casualties. Amongst which you could say the worst is of course it's wonderful in a sense. One of the most toxic conditions of the Kali Yuga is tendency to blaspheme devotees. So why, in this most degraded age, the most precious spiritual treasure has been granted? Because there's no other shelter to those who blaspheme devotees, other than with the forgiveness of those devotees taking shelter from them. And the diseases, psychic, everything, Kali Yuga are so virulent that only the most condensed essence of remedial measures will be effective, and that is the holy name. Nevertheless, today's world, since the time of the Industrial Revolution, has developed a serious chemical dependency problem. Now this was foreseen, not only in Srimad Bhagavatam, but archetypes also, they teach us, even through mythology, folklore, dreams, visions, especially of phenomenal natural occurrences. Don Quixote, this more modern day knight, I don't know, what was he a few centuries ago. He rode out to, like Maharaj Pariksit, to confront any demons in his kingdom. And what did he find? He didn't find Aristashura, Keshi, and Kalya. He found windmills, which are actually a good thing. But what does it mean? It means the machines are coming to replace the monsters and dragons and demons of former times. And then from mechanical monsters, the next is technological monsters, which I've heard are becoming very prominent on the cinema screen or wherever they make their appearances. So, Age of Kali also means Age of Machines. Iron Age means machines. So, Srila Prabhupada, here in Vrindavan, very severely discouraged us from the use of tractors. He said the tractor is the killer of the bull, which in a nutshell means when you have a tractor and all the convenience that goes with it, you're not going to want to have to go look for your oxen, bring them in, feed them and brush them and clean their hooves and yoke them up and deal with whatever challenges they're going to put you through that day. But those are exactly the challenges you need to learn and grow and develop in the quality of relationships. A team of draft animals will not comply with your egotistic outbursts. They will hold the mirror right to your face. The tractor won't do that. The tractor will really reinforce your egotistic, macho, whatever. But, a tractor's convenient. It goes with comfort. But what happens? You have the comfort and convenience of a tractor. You're looking at that ox team, it's not doing anything for you. And you don't give milk. You don't need them. And somewhere in the back of your mind is going to be lurking this critical attitude that can hurt you. Hellish mentality, which will never develop if you realize how you're dependent on them for a healthy, wholesome, prosperous life. It's Dharma. So, the bull represents the powers of creation, male fecundity, fertility, optimized in the relationship between Lord Shiva and Nandi. Because Nandi he's a ferocious bull until Shiva bestrides him, which means yoga. Ox yoke. Yoga comes from yoke. Channeling these bestial propensities for realizing your soul relationship with Krishna. What is the subtler taming going on here? Krishna could foresee that Satya would be jealous of having 7 co-wives without a demonstration that Krishna can expand himself in 7 to perfectly deal with everybody. So the subtler conquest was over Satya's potential jealousy, which he dealt with in their premarital arrangement of taming of the bulls. Arista is the archetypal beast within. And it's interesting that in Krishna Samhita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur appropriately substitutes the name of Rishabhashura, Arista, because it means, Rishabh means bull, archetypal bull. And when he becomes an Ashura, by association with Kamsa, he represents the anartha of weak-hearted, hypocritical neophytes who abandon the path of Vaidhi Bhakti to imitate Raganuga and thereby wreak havoc on the path of Braja, when they're on Braj Bhakti. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur uses the name Arista when he's referring to the subtler manifestation of the same deviation, which means Aristotelian mentality, meaning the empiric path, the speculative approach, overemphasizing deductive, rationalistic science, logic, ethics, politics, morality, all of which have their place, but as supportive to revelation, not as a replacement to it. And even more than those subtle anarthas is the pride that comes from accomplishment in the Aristotelian sciences, which is Aristashura, which Krishna also had to subdue before his spiritual aspiration could be achieved in the birth of Radha. In ISKCON, the bull represents agrarian culture, which is prerequisite to Varnashram Dharma. And the ox is the organic power source, representing protection and independence from the machines which proliferate in the Iron Age field by petroleum. And Krishna foresaw all this coming in his defeat of Shalva, representing the deceptive nature of technological achievements. The heights of empiric vanity are illustrated. And even our acharyas, they use the word Babel, referring to the resurrected tower from Genesis 13, which also indicates an apparent kind of resentment in the Western psyche. Because even Judeo-Christian tradition believes in a golden age to come, age of peace and prosperity. But there appears to be a resentment in the Western psyche that since that golden age has not descended by divine means, we will raise it up from the resources gathered by plundering multinational corporations. And the heights of that resurrected Tower of Babel offer views and visions of the earth, not as a community of subjects, but a collection of objects arranged by heaven and earth, all for exaggerated, trivial human consumption. Which means the whole is meant to serve the part, a mentality in which no one benefits, and results in creation flowing backwards until the wondrous planets which we're privileged to behold with minimal price to be paid, is reduced to toxic waste dump. Srila Prabhupada intended his books to serve as a law for that next 10,000 years, which would be the duration of the Golden Age. And the essence of the Golden Age is the gift of the Golden Avatar, which is Braj Bhakti. The essence is holy name, which Sharanagati means humility, dedication to self, assurance that Krishna will protect us, accepting Krishna as our only maintainer, and accepting all things favorable, rejecting all things unfavorable for the path of Braj Bhakti. Affluenza is a toxic condition of the heart and mind. It is not conducive to loving relationships. An organic agrarian culture is what? It's prosperous, meaning in a wholesome agrarian culture, fueled by natural power sources, with the ox being the most prominent and symbolic, everything is nourishing, nurturing, encouraging, uplifting, and helping everything else. Agrarian life necessitates cooperation, genuine agrarian life, whereas technology fuels competition. And just look at, some of us have had experience with both tractor power and ox power. When you're driving a tractor, you're thinking, can I afford the fuel? Can I afford the toxic fumes being blown in my face? What's that noise? Is that a bearing going bad in the differential? How am I going to pay for that? Is it going to break down right in the middle of the harvest? And everything will be lost? And your consciousness goes toward scarcity. You look up the ox team and you go out. Oh, and tractor power uses chemical fertilizers. Diesel power, chemical fertilizers. That's how you make high explosives, in case you don't know. Dynamite is simply the detonator that ignites it. And I suppose that it has something to do with the production lines, just produced so much during World War II and the war came to an end. What are we going to do? You can put those chemicals in the ground. And things will grow and look like they're plants. And you can put that petroleum in diesel. But did you ever try to compost flowers from Walmart? You go back 5 years later and they must be non-biodegradable. Then you wonder, are they even flowers at all? That's the illusion of tractor-based, it's not even agriculture, it's not culture, it's a culture of death. Agribusiness, ox power. We used to have a standard here in New Vrindavan that manure is so precious. You don't even spread it unless it's going to be plowed or disced that very day. So you try to coordinate, are you spreading manure and plowing and discing? But when you're plowing with an ox team and they pass manure, and as soon as it touches the ground, it's turned under. This is as good as it gets. Nothing is lost. And that manure is enriching the soil, making healthy food for man. And of all things that have been cheapened and contributed to the culture of death by consumerism is the repackaging of the procreative tendencies. When sex becomes an industry. And, prior to the 1960s, the word love had some significance. But hippie misuse And consumer abuse so much cheapened the very word. It left a vacuum that was filled by behaviors which became increasingly maladaptive, profane, and potentially sacrilege, reducing and compartmentalizing, which is what the reductionist sciences tend to do, the concept of reproduction to a mainly physical experience, which means the deeper purpose and actual pleasures referred to when Krishna says in the Gita 7:11 that I am that sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles. Those deeper purposes are left to atrophy when that activity is packaged for consumer use and divorced from creative fecundity. A term has arisen called pro-choice. The choice to abort is the privilege only of God above and earth below. When man takes that into his own hands, that's not male energy. That's not the wholesome male. That's the dark side of the substitute, which creates institutions in which they award degrees called MD, which means medical deity, who dress in white and have a sacrificial altar covered in white. And when the male becomes irresponsible and does not want to face the consequences of what should have been his reproductive responsibility, could that table be the replacement for the abandoned altar of sacrifice, in which the Lamb of God was meant to put an end to not only to even animal sacrifice? Is this kind of behavior in the name of progress indicating that we have reverted to the days predating Abraham, after which abortion was a capital crime even in prehistoric, barbaric civilizations? But under the influence of affluenza, this seems like a rational choice to make. What does that do? It kills the culture of love. Kills everything else with it, but that's like the essence. The human womb is the first habitat, providing security and safety for a healthy child to grow. And when a child progresses from that healthy habitat to the habitat of a healthy home, with a healthy male figure and a healthy mother figure, what happens internally? The child's inner mother and father become internalized and healthy. Their inner child develops a natural tendency to love the father figure who is God above and the mother figure who is earth below. What does all this have to do with our chanting of the holy names? To love Krishna, we have to develop affection for those personalities who are dear to Krishna. And he loves his cows so dearly. But the Maha Mantra, which consists of three names, Hare, Rama, and Krishna, meaning Radha, Balaram, and Krishna. How do those names each demonstrate their affection for Krishna's cows, which includes us. The ones who saw the grass being greener on the other side of the river and straight off into the third world. And Krishna is calling for the sound of his flute. And when we call his name, he draws us back. Krishna, he carries the rope in different places. Sometimes it's on his shoulder, sometimes it's on his turban. The location of his rope indicates various details, but the prime representation here, that rope ensures that the cow will be home in time for milking. And by the plow on Balarama's shoulder, he assures that the oxen will be properly engaged, and they'll be jolly, and they'll be appreciated by human society. And our cow protection will allow Dharma to stand firm with its 4 legs, representing truthfulness, austerity, religion, renunciation. And by the name that she cherishes most of all, Rishabhananate. Rishabh is that archetypal Vedic bull, the hero of Buddhist lore. Rishabh means bull. Banu means son, who's another father figure. And where was she born? In the furrow. I mean, there's different stories, but Srila Prabhupada told the story of Srimati Radharani's birth, word for word except for the names, as that of Sita. What does that signify? The plow, which represents the ox, is the male emblem that penetrates the earth to make her fertile, so the seed can be sown. And ultimately, devotion appears to those who revere this culture of agrarian life. The plow is also expands as the pen in the hand of the acharya, which makes lines on the paper which like furrows in the earth, in which he plants the seeds of his realization, which, when cultivated properly and protected, develop into the Bhakti Lata Bija, which awards the fruits of the love of God, which is the ultimate reward of all of earth's bounty. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Marge. So, what can the folks, the devotees that are mostly serving in the city, what is a practical application of the very deep relationships you talked about today?
That's a most worthy question, thank you. It's not the training and driving an ox to the equivalent of all of us, although some are present in this room. Srila Prabhupada had a desire that his city temples would be related to a farm community, because the exchange just complements and perfects our spiritual life. We're not here to live off the land or to develop an eco-village any more than we promote vegetarianism, although all these things are conducive. The relationship between the city temples and farm communities, when it's reciprocal, it perfects each. Brahminical culture depends on cow protection. And Srila Prabhupada in the early days, he sanctioned that we buy milk from the store if need be, because he considered it so precious. And he sanctioned whatever you have to do to get it. That was before we had farm communities. And right now we're in the first of the farm communities, which, along with Srila Prabhupada's instructions to create a replica of Vrindavan, his whole other emphasis was cow protection.